The Athene Real Talk Podcast explores controversial ideas to stimulate debate and active thinking. These ideas do not always reflect Athene's personal views. Welcome to the Athene Real Talk Podcast.
He has been called the best gamer in the world, hands down.
World-famous gamer and philanthropist Athene.
Gaming for Good, it's called, has raised more than $20 million.
Using his notoriety to raise money for charity.
On activism, science, culture, and self-development.
Proud to have him in the studio today. I would not want to take you on in a video game.
I actually am working on something really cool right now with the group here, and it's maybe something people could also do if they're interested for the lols. Basically, everybody's working on an educational curriculum. And what is that? Educational curriculum basically from retard to people, someone that makes sense. Even though most people here don't make sense, if they would have to imagine university where people can choose courses to get from retard potato brain to someone that makes sense, what are the courses you would give? What would be the content? And how would you overcome each step and each obstacle towards making sense? Good thing about it is it makes you start thinking about like how to teach, and how to teach allows you to look at it as an observer rather than being caught up in your own head, which allows you to learn quicker and have a better view on it. Also allows you to put it into words, which allows you more easily to put it in words for yourself as well. Also makes it very valuable because every single person has its own obstacles and therefore can bring input to the table that is not there just by default, so it has an added value. And on top of that, it also allows for others to be able to learn and grow from it if it's helpful. Thing is, if you can't have a course, then it's your fucking own fault. Because it's not the student that is at fault, it's the teacher. So that's like a kid that is not so good at math. You're not just going to throw them out of school and say, go rot in hell. You have to get better school systems. So basically, people that are interested can maybe also work on that, even though I know a lot of people are not so much into all this making sense stuff, but it's just a nice work thing that we're all here working on. And I will then put everything together and have a website where people can just go, and if they have issues with self-esteem, they can just type self-esteem, and then, basically there's a video, like really nice guidance, how to grow and what it's connected with and what the possible causes are of your low self-esteem. And basically that way you can literally get some structural view on how people work and how connections, like how there is strong connections on a subconscious layer, on a subconscious level with your emotions, because a lot of people sometimes are not so much aware of to which extent what you experience is just a manifestation of the actual mapping of how your brain is mapped, and how your more primitive part of the brain is more responsible for your thoughts and your emotions, and how then these are intellectually channeled through pathways to the more advanced part of the brain. It's actually quite fascinating to know how the brain works and how it actually translates into misconceptions and such, because at the end of the day, with a deeper understanding of the self and what you are, you can really allow yourself to overcome so many of these flaws that people have. And I just really like to see how when you map the brain, how you can actually almost map side by side psychological disorders and also like flaws such as labeling yourself and being angry at you because you experience certain emotions or thoughts pop up, even though it's subconscious process and you're not fully aware of. And the main issue is identifying with these thoughts and these emotions. Like a lot of people are not aware of it, but the problem is not so much that you have these emotions or these thoughts, but the problem is that you identify with it. And the reason why that is because these emotions pop up or these thoughts pop up and you immediately act, and then afterwards you start rationalizing and think about it, while what you should be doing is you look at the thoughts and the emotion as an observer, think about it, and then act. And as a result, it's much easier to not identify with these thoughts and emotions, and as a result, just experience them, have them come over you, and just basically much more easily overcome them. And that's something, I even talked to Tanya about it today, that's a very, very important insight, a very important awareness, like being able to observe your own processes is crucial for you to overcome your flaws. Because as long as you're trapped into your head, you can really look at a problem, be really like experiencing it, and be completely like basically overrun by it, and have very little insight and view on how to overcome these issues. And it's by observing them and understanding how your brain works and not identifying with them that it allows you to basically put them into context, and through photosynthesis be able to rewrite your emotions and even your thoughts, because it's actually a process that you can do. And that's what they also do in therapy, but you can basically do self-therapy. You can be your own therapist by looking at your emotions and thoughts as an observer. Of course, you experience it, but you don't identify with it. And to give you an example, if you bump your feet against a wall, you don't identify with the pain. You just experience it and you go about your day. But the problem is when it's emotional pain or when it's more complex or whatever, you start identifying with it. And that is what allows you to make it even worse and worse and make it go into a vicious circle. For example, low self-esteem. Or I will just give ego. Like ego, everybody gets easily triggered when they get pushed or they get into a defensive state when they're threatened or whatever. But the problem is not so much that gut reaction of fear or ego mechanic, like growling or whatever, like a lion growling. That's not the problem. The problem is identifying with your ego through identity and go like, yeah, I am the best. Fuck you, because then you actually have a vicious cycle where your identity is basically strengthening the neural activity of your ego and you stay in that state and vice versa. Same with, by the way, and this is also a fascinating thing, like yesterday I talked a lot about validation seeking mentality, and I'm going to talk about it again today. And I said like validation seeking mentality is something that people can overcome by understanding that the world doesn't resolve around you. Like you're not that important, you're just part of a bigger picture. And being able to experience yourself more selfless, you don't really need all this validation because it's you. And some people like validly say like, yeah, but validation is part of the learning curve when you grow up as a kid, whatever. But I wouldn't call that validation. I would call it more approval seeking. And the difference between approval seeking and a validation seeking is just as much a difference between ego and identity. Approval seeking is just literally the primitive emotion of wanting love or warmth or being validated.
Hey Athene, what drives you to help other people? Not the charity, but the real talk.
Yes, the real talk drives me more than the charity because the real talk allows me to inspire people to grow, which is even a bigger ripple effect than charity. Because charity won't do as much as people's awareness. People's awareness is at the foundation of most issues in the world. But what I also wanted to say basically about approval seeking is a process that allows you to learn certain skills and learn what is good and bad. But as this primitive emotion of wanting approval so you can guide yourself through life and figure out how to learn things, when you grow older, it becomes intellectually channeled through identity. And that's when approval seeking can become validation seeking. And the problem with validation seeking is that it's flawed and it makes no sense. Just as much as having an ego with identity doesn't make sense. And that is because of the flawed paradigm of what we think we are. And as we grow up in this very individualistic society where we're hyper individualistic, everything is channeled through like, it's you, it's about you. And we find ourselves so fucking important and we gotta impress and this and that. But all these things are just flawed concepts. It's not about having a nice car or, showing off or whatever. These are just things that we've been social conditioned through because it allows, companies to sell their stuff, allows things to keep rolling. But in essence, what we are is not wanting to have a nice car or whatever. It's about evolving, moving forward. Just as cells have evolved through billions of years of evolution to what we are, our design, our purpose is to evolve. And we don't evolve by having a fancy car or impressing your neighbor that doesn't give a shit about you. That's not how we evolve. We evolve by, having purpose, by following our purpose, which is helping each other, which is moving forward with technology, which is figuring out and understanding what we are, which has actually been a very long process. And it's only recently through neuroscience and such that we start understanding more and more what we are and who we are because, of more understanding in the brain. And I find it really fucking awesome that you can basically understand validation seeking mentality because it's channeled through the concept of identity. The moment you understand that what you are is not your identity, is not your story, and what you are is all the neural activity, is including your environment, and you understand it's not about you, it's about the social organism, about everything around you, about moving forward, just as a cell has its purpose in its body, just as much as we have our purpose in the bigger scheme of things. When you start realizing that you don't value yourself as much as an identity, but just as an essence of being alive, and you enjoy what you are on a core level, but you don't channel it through identity or whatever. And of course, if that self-knowledge, when you grow up and you have approval seeking and you want approval from your parents from a very childish perspective, just that love, that warmth, if you don't get enough of that when you're young, as you grow older, you try to intellectually channel that through identity, and that's why it becomes so validation seeking. And for some people, it's unsaturated. You just want more and more and more. It never ends. But if you start understanding, wait a minute, it's not about me, like the world doesn't surround around me. It really allows you to understand, like, but wait, I'm not that important. This identity is not that important. It's just like I can feel great about just being alive and existing and not taking things for granted, just being in the present. And at the same time, I don't need to impress others and be all that fancy, because it doesn't matter. What matters is how I move forward, how I can help, how I can grow, how I can, understand myself and such. Basically, you go from a validation-seeking mentality to a more selfless, more aware person. And I said I was going to do a lot of research in self-esteem and validation-seeking. And that's what I'm doing. That's what I've been doing. That's why I'm being able to explain these things so sharply. And I know some people might say, like, but wait a minute, I don't understand. Like, in order to understand what I'm talking about, it's very important to be able to look at yourself as an outsider. You just understand that emotions and thoughts, you really understand that emotions and thoughts are subconsciously popping out, and you do not identify. Even if you have a thought, you have a gut reaction like, oh, fuck this guy or whatever. Instead of saying fuck you or whatever, you just think like, wait, you try to understand why it's happening, and then you can actually course correct your actions, which creates a positive feedback loop that allows you to rewire yourself. So you can sometimes really feel sad and think, I'm worthless, I'm nothing. But these thoughts pop up even before you're aware of them. And if you just look at these ideas and thoughts like, I'm worthless, I'm nothing, you can really look at, go like, whoa, that's fascinating how this is actually taking place in the limbic system, and it's not in my control. But my ability to just look at it and not identify with these thoughts popping out of nowhere, saying I'm worthless or whatever, allows me to take distance and accept myself for what I am and experience a much more joyful and fulfilled life. Of course, it's something that takes some time, but every time when you're in that mindset where you just look at yourself, you can be more in the present. You can just experience yourself for what you are. And the amazing thing is, like, a lot of people have the ability to, when they're in the present, to experience their reward center, to actually just experience what they have around and not take it for granted, and just experience joy. And it's not because you grew up and because of the way you grew up with your parents, your friends, or whatever in your environment, you haven't really been able to make that connection between the self and the reward center. That as you grow older, that you cannot create that connection. You do some self-approval. You just go like, yeah, I'm doing a good job. And I'm going to give you guys a few tips. So like the validation seeking, you can overcome by understanding that it's not about you, that identity is a flawed concept, and that the world doesn't surround around you, and fully understanding that allows you to just let go and go like, yeah, I'm actually not that important. It's about the bigger picture. But at the same time, you value yourself on a core level because you exist, and just existing makes you worthwhile, experiencing yourself good. There is no reason to feel bad. Of course, you can still experience these emotions, but by just looking at it as an observer, you can overcome them. And here's a few tips for low self-esteem. First of all, what's very important is to understand that being in the moment, in the present, and being outside your head, and you can practice that through meditation, through guided meditation, can really help you a lot. This is the first step. Well, I would say the first step is also working out and eating healthy, but this is also something that is quite important. Just, like being able to be in the present, not being inside your head. Meditating will really help you a lot. Being able to look at these emotions without labeling them, without identifying with them. Then what you also can do is you can just realize that there is nothing you have to achieve in the future. You just working on it right now is already the best version you can be. So just by working on it, you're already worth it. Just by working on it, you're already growing to your true potential right now. You don't need to look in the future and have these crazy achievements and go like, oh, I failed. No, just right now working on it is the best thing you can do. And that is something you can use to basically approve yourself with. Just you working on it while you're working out, or while you're just doing something that you feel like, hey, this is what I want to do. Just doing that at that point is the best version you can be. And if you're aware of that without thinking too much in the future or whatever, you can really allow yourself to overcome that, and you can create like a role, a momentum role. What you can also do is like, when you look at these emotions and these thoughts, you can literally like use the dissonance that you experience, the sadness, into your advantage by just understanding what's going on and just literally smiling at it. Just by understanding like it, you experience the emotion, you go like, this is so amazing that I'm having these sad emotions and I understand what is going on. And you can literally just smile at your misery, this misery feeling that you have. And by doing so, you can put it in a little bit better context, because by doing so, it just goes over. It comes and it goes. It's only the identification. Identifying with your thoughts and your emotions is what makes it so hard. The emotion itself, the sadness itself, is not so bad. It's identification with it that makes it a lot worse. So being aware of that can really allow you to also overcome this low self-esteem. What is also important is being able to trust yourself. And a good example I can give you is like, imagine you have a clone would you be able to trust your clone if your clone would have full decisions over you in one day? Would you be able to do that? Or would you not feel comfortable with that? Because being able to start feeling comfortable trusting your clone allows you to feel more comfortable trusting yourself. And that's something you can actually work on. You can literally work with almost an imaginary clone and try to say like, okay, if I do that, I try to be good. And building trust with yourself will allow you to start channeling trust to other people as well and giving people the benefit of the doubt. Like if you see emotions for what they are and you're outside your head and you see the thoughts, then instead of starting to label, like you don't identify yourself, you don't label yourself with these emotions, these thoughts, you will stop doing that with other people and you will stop judging them and give them more credit. And you will look at their actions and base your decisions on their actions rather than on these flaws that you've grown up with and that you see in other people. Because at the end of the day, you see the world through your own eyes, and being able to start trusting yourself is quite important. But of course, if you have low self-esteem, then of course, you don't have so much confidence in your actions. And as a result, you feel more like other people have to make these decisions because of fucking hell. Like you don't want to make these important decisions yourself because you don't have so much confidence. And if then these decisions are made by your parents or whatever, or your friends, and it goes really bad, you start experiencing a lot of dissonance and you start distrusting and creating an ego. And that's why you have certain people with very low self-esteem, and on top of that, also very distrustful, very active ego, because they've gone through that process of low self-esteem, starting to trust other people, and then had to really create a very strong ego in order to overcome this strong pain. But by doing so, you will become more confident in social interactions by trusting others, but first by trusting yourself. So that's also really, really important. Accepting your emotions and your thoughts and, stop judging yourself and others is also something that comes hand in hand and really will help you quite a bit in growing as a person. So that is some tips for low self-esteem, what you can do, literally concrete tips. And the thing is though, like what is important is you have to be outside your head. You have to look at yourself as an observer, because you can, when you experience these emotions and these thoughts, you can really look at them as if you look at another person. And this is really crucial. This is so crucial, because if you can't do that, you won't even really be able to truly listen to what I say, because you will just immediately be in your head and go like, oh no, this and that, what is he talking about? But if you just be able to put distance, which you can, just like you listen to another person, you can listen to your own thoughts. It's something that our neocortical frontex, the part of the brain, more advanced part of the brain, is able to do. So meditation allows you, but first working out and eating healthy. By doing so, what you create is a stronger connection between the self and the reward center. And as time goes, you overcome these emotions and such, and you feel better about yourself. These insights are quite important. I really think a lot of people that are watching the stream have a lot of issues with validation seeking and self-esteem, and these things can be overcome when you work on it very concretely with step by step, which is, I would say, the first step is to be looking at yourself from an outsider and experience these thoughts and emotions, not identify with them. And I would say the second step is to be in the present and understand that what you're doing and working on it really allows you already to experience yourself to your own potential. You are worth it because you're already working on it, and being aware of that. I know that some people with very low self-esteem will still feel like, no, I'm not, but you just look at these thoughts. These thoughts just come. They don't control you. The thoughts do not control you unless you're in your head. If you're in your head, you are your thoughts and you are your emotions. If you're not in your head, you are a thinker and you look at your emotions and your thoughts, and it allows you to overcome them and control them and be stronger than them by just letting them go and letting them come over you. You don't push them away. You don't, make them get stronger and stronger by neglecting them. Understanding these things and being able to work on them really allows you to grow like crazy. So that is something that I've been working quite a lot on. Be aware that a lot of your desire and your design is based on your reward center. If your reward center basically is a system that allows you to reward you for things that are good and doesn't reward you for things that are not good, and basically a lot of your behavior is based on that. So if you understand that, you can really basically, even through just self-awareness, you can even stimulate your reward center by just being in the present and not experiencing what you have for granted. You can already feel quite good. And the thing is, if you're more in control and more reflecting, you can really grow so much as a person. Not be trapped in this identity and this mis-social conditioning that we all have gone through and only recently start to understand the mechanics of it. Yeah, I know I talk really fast. I'm sorry about that. But there will be podcasts about this. This will all be put in podcasts. What is also important to understand is how the ego works. I already explained it yesterday. I'm explaining it again, but also just how the brain works. So you guys understand, through evolution, we have gone from the primitive part to the more advanced parts of the brain. And the primitive part, the limbic system, has emotions and thoughts. And then the more advanced part of the brain allows you to reflect and think about these emotions and thoughts. Your emotions and thoughts are basically taking place subconsciously. You're not even aware of them. They just pop out. The problem is identifying with them. When you identify with them and you're trapped inside your own head, you are your thoughts and you are your emotions. And that's not a good thing, because then you become impulsive, you become reactionary. But by being able to look at it as an outsider, you can start understanding the cause. And the beauty of it is, if you understand the cause, you can rewire the emotions and change the thoughts and disconnect certain beliefs with emotions. It's a very, very powerful thing that we are able to do. And everybody that is watching the stream right now is able to do that. You guys have the brain ability to do that. And maybe it's a little bit hard at the start, but by doing so, you really allow yourself more and more to look at yourself as an observer, and more get into the present. Don't carry around your fears about the future and the past and this and that. You don't have all these voices in your head. You just look at them and experience it, and don't judge yourself for them. Isn't that beautiful? Wonder if I'm explaining it well, but if you can just experience sadness, or you can experience really strong thoughts about how fucking a loser you are, or how great you are, or whatever, and just look at it as an observer and not identify with these thoughts. It's quite powerful to be able to look at yourself and not identify yourself with these thoughts that come up subconsciously. So then you don't have to be a loser, because you understand these thoughts are just coming up. I don't have control over these thoughts. You don't have to be a loser. And I will give you a little inspirational speech here, guys. You have to understand, when you grow up and your parents and your friends or your surroundings keep telling you that you fail, that you're a loser, that you're not worth it, then these thoughts start playing themselves automatically. And you start identifying with them. You think that you are a loser. You think you are a fucking, a nobody. You are worthless. You actually start believing it. But the beauty of it is, you are not your social conditioning. You can literally look at these thoughts and these emotions and say, this is not me. I am someone that has potential. And me just being able to work on it and look at these things and overcome them, that is what gives me value. That's what allows me to overcome these haters or these people trying to bring you down. And honestly, if I was going through life myself, and if I would let other people let me go down and identify with what people say and actually believe what people say, I wouldn't be achieving what I achieved. And this even goes to my father and even my mother to a certain extent. There's a lot of things that I did in my life that they said, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. And if I just, as growing up as a child, you just look up to your parents, you absorb what they say. If they tell you that you're worthless or whatever, you're going to start believing that. But being able to look at these thoughts and these emotions and say, this is not me. Isn't that fucking beautiful? Being able to understand that what you are is just a momentary expression of the neural activity present right now. That's what you are. Nothing more, nothing less. Allows you to just let go all these things and just experience the presence. The beautiful life you are, the beautiful life you have. We are living in such a rich time where there's so much to learn, so much to grow. Why let that go? Because when you grew up, someone made you believe that you're shit. Why would you do that? Being able to understand that you are not your emotions, that you are not your thoughts, do not identify them, allows you to really overcome that. And honestly, I've had setbacks myself. But by starting to understand that, you start thinking more rational and you start growing as a person and achieving things that don't just for yourself, but also for people around you, by understanding that it's not, that the world doesn't surround around you, that you can just let go that identity and that ego where everybody judges you, and understanding that that's not what you are. Don't identify with that. Really allows you to, maybe for some people it's scary. Go yeah, but who am I? You are an ever-changing unit. You're all the time a different person. You can't tell yourself this is who you are. You're ever changing. And being able to accept that, in order to be more certain than anything, you got to accept uncertainty. To be fearless, you got to, on a certain level, come to acceptance with fear. Just experience it. Don't fight it. And that's how you grow. That's how you reach your limit. That's how you reach your potential, and you can inspire other people. And this is real shit. You go around, you carry yourself up with achievements and with virtual goods, and you attach certain value to that. But that's not what you are. And if you start realizing that, you can really overcome that. You can grow beyond that. You can really grow to your full potential. You have so much potential. It's insane. And because of a lack of understanding, because you weren't lucky because of growing up, people were putting you down or whatever, you start believing that, and because you didn't have this insight, you start believing it, and you kept believing it, and that's what limited you. It's literally like the example of an elephant. I don't know if it's a true example, but I read it's just a story where a small elephant is put on a chain, and it grows older, and because when it was small, it couldn't get off it. It stays in the chain for its entire life, never goes free. But even when it's grown up, it just has to do one yank and it's free. It will forever be shackled and it will forever be trapped. Isn't that crazy? That we are running around with all these illusionary chains that have been put when we were a child because we didn't know better. When I was a kid and my father told me something and said I sucked, I actually believed it was me. I believed it. And if you grow older and you start creating this identity and you have this emotion that you suck, you're going to create an identity that believes that you sucks. But that's not what you are. You are an ever-changing unit. And the moment you start realizing it, you can detach yourself. You can look at it as an outsider and understand, but wait, I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my emotions. I'm ever-changing. I can grow. I can be better. And if you start realizing that, you can just look at yourself for what you are, like this organism that is a result of billions of years of evolution, and its design, its purpose is to move forward, to evolve. You don't put your life in the context of what other people tell you to say. You don't put your life in the context of how people judge you. You put your life in the context of the grander scheme. That's when you really breathe purpose. You don't get purpose by buying a fancy car, by being better than someone else. That's not how you get purpose. You get purpose by being a team. And that's how we achieved to live nowadays. We didn't achieve what we achieve now being solo players. We achieved, human species achieved what they had because of their social ability, their connection with each other. And with all society becoming more and more, focused on the individual, we lose that. That's why we're so lonely. That's why we're so sad. We lose touch with what we are. Because it doesn't get taught in schools. They don't teach that shit in schools. They should teach this in schools. Because we know this stuff that I'm telling you guys is out there. This information is out there. Like neuroscience, psychology, like these things are out there. But they're not getting taught. And as a result, we have all these people that have these dysfunctional beliefs and go through life with all these imaginary change and that really disable them from being their own full potential to grow for what they really are designed to do. And that's the beauty, that's the difference. When you look at a caveman or you look at you, the evolution, the intellectual evolution, like imagine the doors that can open when you can elevate your flawed identity and these ideas and these functional beliefs. How much can you achieve? And not for you, but for what you are. You are literally the product of billions of years of evolution, and understanding you requires you to understand everything around you. It's an amazing journey. And I find it so fascinating that because we don't get that thought that, we get trapped in these dysfunctional beliefs while beauty is right in front of you, while the light, enlightenment is right in front of you. You wonder what is happiness, what is like, it's right in front of you. It's there, it's what you are, every single moment. But we grow up and we learn to believe stuff that is not what we are. And that's why we we try to compensate with all these things that are empty, that are, distracting, that we have learned to value because other people told us to, because they got told them that it was value, and they got told them that it was valuable. But at the end of the day, it's not. What is really valuable, everybody knows what's really valuable. People have that feeling, that they have that feeling when they go and they can help people or they can do something with purpose. They feel much better. They feel alive. And yet we live in a society where all these things are being channeled in small little achievements to try and poke that reward center. But the reward center didn't evolve for us to get achievements in games or whatever. It evolved so we can, we can work together and achieve things, greatness, achieve real greatness. Just got to tell you guys this. I don't know if this is helpful, but guys, I really hope people with low self-esteem or validation seeking, I really hope you guys really understand what I mean. And I know for some people that might have stronger ego issues or strong identity issues, this can be really very threatening and experience quite feel whoa, I don't want to let go. But I'm telling you, by letting go, you are really free. I've been doing a lot of research about self-esteem and validation seeking. And I don't know if this helps, but I did research. I did research about how the brain works, how it connects. Validation seeking, and I already explained it, I'm explaining it again, is basically approval seeking as a child. There is a primitive part in you that wants approval. because that's how we learn skills. That's how we grow to learn what is good and what is bad. You don't want to eat poison, or you got to know that you have to run away from a lion or whatever. Like, basically, there's certain mechanisms that we have to learn, and approval seeking allows you to learn these skills. But the problem is that through evolution, and only very recently we have had a very big spike in cultural growth and technology and such, we still have these systems at place, and we have this more intellectual evolved part of the brain that starts channeling these emotions without fully understanding where they come from. And that is why being able to look at it as an outsider really highly gives you the ability to combat them and rewrite them. For some people it can take longer, for some it can be faster, but once you are being able to be in that observer state, you have basically the ability to be at peace, to be in the present. Being in the present is very, very important. Of course, you got to keep the momentum going. And how do you keep the momentum going? By being able to trust yourself. If you're just in the present and you're just sitting on the sofa all day meditating, that's not going to, like, your body wants you to survive. It wants to evolve. And that's why being able to, translate this present, this awareness into action, whether it's like eating healthy, working out, or doing something that you're really passionate about, really allows you to stay in that zone. And that's why I'm so self-confident and so constantly in the now. It's because every single day, every single moment, I do what I'm passionate about and what I believe in. And everybody can do that. It's not just something that is there just for me. Of course, I have to work hard. I have a lot of stuff and a lot of problems and obstacles that I have to overcome, but I do it with passion because I really know it's the right thing to do. I know that it's what makes sense. And that's the other thing. Like, when you think about it, we all value something very fundamentally. We all value something. And it's mainly what we are shortcoming that we, on an emotional level, that we start to try and channel through intellectual concepts. And maybe if we want safety, we value making money or whatever. But the thing is, like, by valuing the most, making sense, being reasonable, aligning your beliefs with reality, of course, it's a very advanced concept, but by doing so, not only does it allow you to desire making sense, even when you are, not as aware from a subconscious way, but it also allows you to be much more structured and confident and really build a foundation that is built on science and understanding, and just the idea that that everything does make sense. Everything does make sense. It's just like someone believing in God, knowing that God has a reason. Everything has a reason. And what I mean with that is, when you make sense as a core value, you know that everything has a reason. There's a logical reason for everything. And that's the thing. That's the beauty of making sense. Your fear gets translated into curiosity, a will of understanding. Because if you experience dissonance, instead of pushing it away and not wanting to hear, you want to understand it. That's why I have such a desire to learn. Whenever there's something that doesn't make sense to me, it's because I know I don't have the knowledge. I don't understand it. So whenever you go around and you get frustrated by something, you say, fuck this shit or whatever, it's because you don't understand it. All the dissonance based on beliefs is caused by a lack of understanding. Of course, if someone punches you in the face and it hurts and you experience dissonance because of the pain, like, that's not a lack of understanding, of course, but like, I'm just saying, like, when it comes down to concepts and beliefs, the dissonance you experience between two contradictory beliefs is because of a lack of understanding, because the world all makes sense. There is no duality. Like, you have action, reaction. Things happen for a reason. And that's why, this drive of, like, if you value making sense, you automatically start valuing learning about things and knowledge. And that is something that has brought me where I am now. I just got lucky that, I got a lot of quite good self-esteem when I grew up. But on top of that, I was also lucky that since young, I wanted to make sense of everything. I really valued logic a lot, and I never gave up on that. And I read up on a lot of things and such, and as a result, I just kept growing as a person. And that's why, I started understanding also more neuroscience, evolutionary biology, why we're here, moving forward. Like, I put my life into the context of the bigger picture. I didn't channel it through this shallow lens of, this is me, it's all about me. No, we're just small. We're like, you is more than you. It's more like a collective, and the you that you're even referring to is very small, and it's not that important, but it's the group, it's what we achieve and how we move forward. That is what's important, and you can have a very big impact in that. And that's where you can get so much purpose. That's the case for me. That's how I do it. It really allows me in a big way to be able to structure my life and achieve things. And it really goes very far. It even goes in the way I store information. Like for me, like where I make sense, when I think about things, I don't even store things like normal people store things. I store things with logical checkpoints. And what I mean with that is I always have an agenda. Like when I talk to someone, when I take an action, I always have a structure. Why am I doing this? I always think like, okay, I'm going to talk to him because I want to help him to grow as a person. So it's very clear agenda. So when I talk to someone, I have a list of what I want to talk about and a to-do list, and I just store things with logical checkpoints. If he says something that doesn't make any sense, I just go to the core, I compress the information, and I just, store these things. And then afterwards, when I think about stuff, I just look at all these core checkpoints and I just talk around it. It's basically like you have the formula of each checkpoint and then you just put the numbers in, and you can basically, it's like having a room without texture or like a game. You just have the math and then you add texture on top of that. It really allows you so much more easily to also be clear-minded because you don't have so much information to store. You can also more easily make connections and such. But yeah, just making sense in general and being in the present and the now allows you to be more clear-minded. So yeah, eating healthy as well, working out, meditating, sleeping enough, putting yourself in an environment that stimulates you. All these things are so helpful. And it's really crazy how everything is connected. Like when you have low self-esteem and you don't have confidence to make decisions, you let other people decide for you. If it doesn't happen good, you start experiencing distrust and fear, and it can even go into paranoia, and then it translates into your worldview and such. It's just fascinating to see how everything is so connected. It's just crazy. And then we can ask all these questions that we have. We can really wonder like, oh yeah, why is the world this, why is that? But the real answer to your questions is the reason why you ask the questions. I repeat myself quite a bit if you also hear the previous podcast, but it's so important to understand. If you understand that it's more important to answer why you ask the question than the answer to the question. If you understand that, like it basically, talks about the underlying reason of maybe you seeing the world being bad or whatever, because you have these core like subconscious emotions that basically drive you for who you are. And that's really something for a lot of people to understand, is like what drives you, what controls you is your subconsciousness. That's where everything starts. And your ability to just look at it as an outsider gives you some control. What is also important to know is to understand that when you think your thoughts and your emotions, that it's part of what you are. Even though identifying with them is something you shouldn't be doing, and understanding that these emotions come and you don't have control over it, at the same time, you have to understand that it's part of what you are. So yeah, like it just allows you to be able to understand that your subconsciousness is constantly, interacting with you, because it's one and the same thing. The duality you experience is because your subconsciousness is not so much in line with your more advanced parts of the brain. And that's why making sense allows you to align the two. Some people have different core values. You have people that have money, friendship, family. But I think making sense is one of the best core values to have because it allows you to structure your life so much. What I also want to say is, like, when you have low self-esteem and you have a lack of confidence and such, you much more easily deal with things through fear. So if there's something unknown, rather than being fascinated by it, you're more easily have anxiety and you have fear over it. The reason why I'm explaining this is because, like, the reason why my dissonance was being translated into a will of understanding is because when I fall back to myself, I felt good because of my mother giving me a lot of love and warmth. But like, let's say I really it would be the other way around and I would have a really low self-esteem. Then if there's something unknown, rather than being curious, I would be fearful. So you can really see how from a very young age, depending on your self-esteem, unknown can be either, channeled through anxiety and fear or through curiosity and basically love. And it's really fascinating to see how literally the way you are grown up shapes the way you look at the world and the way you approach the world. Because I had a very high self-esteem due to how I grew up, I was very passionate about understanding things. And when it then became translated and channeled through more intellectual part of the brain as I grew up, I kept, trying to understand and learn. And that's something that's very fascinating. People that have higher self-esteem can sometimes, as they grow up, because of environment or whatever, like they can have very loving parents, but they can be quite intellectually not as developed. And as a result, their self-esteem gets a hit when they grow older. But I was lucky because I had high self-esteem because of how I grew up. And then since I was quite lucky with my brother and his friend talking about a lot of intellectual stuff, I also had very strong intellectual confidence because I found answers to unknowns. So these two went hand in hand, because that's what it is. Like, first you have this more primitive way of just experiencing warmth, but when it becomes intellectually channeled to the more intellectual part of the brains, you want more intellectuality in what you do. And that's something that also restalled me. It's very fascinating. Like, when he was really younger, he went to acting school, to theater. And at the start, he was just feeling extremely good about getting the attention of the crowd, you know, like just being able to be in front of the stage and stuff. But as he grew older, it was not enough. He wanted to channel it more intellectually, and that's when he was more busy with pieces that had to have more content and intelligence. And that's the thing, a lot of even artists go through that phase where at the first they are fame, they have all this fame, but then they see that it's shallow and they want to do something more intellectual with it. And a lot of people fail to do that, and then basically get a very big self-esteem crash because they cannot channel that self-esteem intellectually, and it doesn't go hand in hand. But yeah, if both can, through knowledge and understanding, it really allows you to grow and flourish as a person. And it's just fascinating to see you have this primitive layer, and then you have the more intellectual layer, and things just channel as you grow older. I find that very fascinating. I'm actually surprised these things don't really get taught in schools. I also want to say something, like, basically someone linked a video on the Making Sense subreddit, and it was about like actualize.org, and I removed the thread, and he was asking like, oh, why did you remove the thread? And the reason why I removed the thread was because, even though it can, I'm sure it also helps people, but like he has many videos about the law of attraction, where you can just, you know, with your positive energy, and also really questions logic and rationality and says like, hey, this and that. And the problem with that is like it's self-contradictory. You cannot really argue that logic is flawed, because you need logic to argue to begin with. And if you start distanciating yourself from, you know, logic and science and say like, oh, it's the gut feeling, not only like are you going back to this gut emotional layer that is much more liable and inconsistent, but also you're basically neglecting reality for what it is and looking at it for what it is. And as a result, if someone has that kind of belief system, not only is it a lot less likely to be accurate, but also the insight and the information that come from that are much more questionable. And that's why I removed that, because it's not a good source of information. If I get information, I want to be able to trust it. Even though he might be saying things that are really interesting, I will always have a double check saying like, what are the sources? Where does he come with that? Because if you don't have like a scientific, logical approach to the knowledge you acquire, then there is no check. There is no reality check. There is no, you know, check with whether or not this is accurate or not. And that's why I removed the thread. Yeah, there's another thing I wanted to say, by the way. I'm quite on a roll here, like being able to have a really strong logic and understanding that what you are on a core fundamental level is very selfless. Like it doesn't surround around you. It's not just about you. Like this sense of identity is not what you are. And basically what you are is all this neural activity and being able to experience that connection with everything. If you really have enough, right? If you grew up and at the start you really want love and such, but at a certain point, if you have strong self-esteem and stuff, you feel like giving back. That's what you feel. You feel like giving back. And that can be something that is fed from an abundance of warmth that you already have and you want to give back, or it can also be rational. But the thing is that like if you are selfless and you're quite logical, everything you do is with good intentions. And if you do everything with good intentions, what happens is you can experience extreme, strong confidence and no regret. And for me, it really goes way back. Actually, it goes back when I was 14 years old. Because I was thinking, when did I really become selfless? And it's around 14 years old. It's actually the day I told my mother that I wanted for my birthday that she stopped smoking. And I didn't want presents anymore. It was when I was 14 years old. I was basically very much selfless, growing into the selfless area, and I always wanted to help the world and see how I could contribute. And since then, like basically, if you would come to me and say like, hey, I've done stuff in my life that when I look back were flawed, but with the information I had, I always acted with the best intentions. And as a result, I don't really have a regret. Even now, if I do something and I fuck up, I didn't fuck up at that point because I didn't have the information. And as a result, I can really go through life with a very strong level of confidence, just knowing that at any single moment in time, I did the right thing. And that really gives you a lot of confidence and a lot of clarity, mental clarity. People cannot make me feel guilty. It's almost impossible because I know like I did it with the right intentions. What are you going to say? So like strong, like selflessness goes hand in hand with strong logic, can go hand in hand with strong confidence because you know you're doing everything with the right intentions. Very good side effect. There was something I was actually wondering What I was actually wondering was to which extent, because when I talk, I say all these things and a lot of things are quite interesting, but it's still just knowledge. And in order for you to be able to apply this knowledge, you have to be able to connect it through yourself. Like, in order for you to be able to absorb this knowledge is by being able to relate it to yourself. And how do you do that? Through finding experiences that connected with. And I was wondering to which extent being able to absorb knowledge is connected with the way we learn math, for example. It's something that Katarina brought up, and I found that really interesting, because when you're learning math, at the start, it's a lot of knowledge. You can be working on a certain part, and it's really a lot of information. But then, when you see the logic, it just clicks. And as a result, it's because you experience the mathematical formula. You basically absorb it. And I wonder to which extent that turning knowledge into awareness is the same logical pattern that goes about, that you actually experiencing the formula of the knowledge, the formula within the knowledge, basically, and you connect to it. And as a result, you just concise it. You basically compress it like crazy. I was just wondering if there's a correlation, because I wouldn't be surprised that's the case, and would be quite fascinating if that's what it is, because by relating it to your own experience, you know the equation, and you can actually, just apply the same equation to the knowledge and compress it, and then suddenly you just know. You just know because it's so simple. It's like you can see a very complex reality, but it could just all be brought about with one mathematical equation.
Subscribe to youtube.com/AtheneWins. Watch the live stream at twitch.tv/AtheneLive and follow The Real Athene on Snapchat.